With the fervor of Overwatch League Season 2 right around the corner and the roster mania starting to reach a peak after a few valleys, it's time to get back into the strategy and the overarching macro play of Overwatch and really trying to push strategy forward. And I think one thing that we haven't seen a ton of, for a number of reasons, is gimmick strategies or cheese. Now, what is cheese? Cheese is more of a definition used in other strategy games, and more leans towards a one-off strategy that's used to throw an opponent off guard and maybe squeak out a victory with some sort of unorthodox strategy. Now, how could this be applied to Overwatch? That's, that's fine and dandy if that's a definition used for other games, but how do we apply it to Overwatch? Now, it's been difficult, and I've been pretty public in saying that I think teams have found a difficult time developing strategies on their own, or maybe even developing their own styles in the pre-Overwatch League era because of how financially unstable the scene was, where if you did not place very, very highly, or you didn't have some really definitive brands tied to your team, it was difficult to really be financially stable in a sense. So it was more focused around practicing what was good, what was considered good, and just being the best at that one thing. Now that the Overwatch League exists and teams are a little bit more financially stable, I would say, now you should start to see teams developing more and more, and I think we are starting to see that. And we to be fair, we saw a little bit of this towards the tail end of the Overwatch League, but for the most part, they were playing for the win. But I don't necessarily think playing for the win should limit you from developing your own style. For instance, I know that Elk from Philadelphia Fusion's Academy, Fusion University, has been pretty public in talking about how if you're good enough at something, that you should be able to develop a style around it. And he is quite a talented Ana player, and you started to see them lean a little bit more towards Ana in developing strategies that more incorporates it. Same thing with NYXL. NYXL obviously have Jonak, and you started to see him dictate the meta, where if you are that good at Zenyatta, it forced teams to either match you or try to develop something to work around that specific style. Another team that is a little bit more fringe, but still fits within the narrative, is a team called Ambitious Immortals over in China. They've now qualified for Contender Season 3. And one of their players is a fantastic Doomfist player. So much so that they've developed a very distinct style to play around him that, again, throws people off guard. But these are more styles, and they're not necessarily gimmicks or cheese. Something that could be considered a cheese is what Osh-Tech Warriors played against British Hurricane. Now, to my knowledge, this isn't necessarily a cheese. This is just something teams are starting to use. But for the most part, I think it's going to be considered something a little bit more gimmicky, used to throw people off guard and really keep people honest and make people scout and make people use information to their advantage. Now, what Osh-Tech did is they, on Hanamura attack, on Osh-Tech's attacking round, they used Symmetra to instantly teleport onto the point with a Goat's composition, or something that's a little bit more tanky, that's more deathball-y. So they teleport directly onto the point. That's their kind of hill to die on. That's their fort, and they fight from there, and they did fairly well against it. And you're starting to see teams in Contenders Europe, especially in trials, do that more often than not. And this again it's going to start to throw people off. I believe, especially in European trials, we saw a team run a high ground Bastion strat with a Symmetra setup for it on Hanamura B defense, which I thought was really interesting. You're going to see more of that in the Overwatch League. I'm without a doubt. I stand by that prediction. Now, to talk about the Overwatch League, I do believe that we did see some strange gimmicks or some odd styles that were more akin to throw people off guard than they were to really be defined as like, this is what we think is very good here. Rather, this is something that this team thinks is runnable. It's viable, but it's more a surprise strategy. And one that I've always thought was really fun and interesting was the Dallas Fuel's Gibraltar A defense strat, where they would run a Sombra when she wasn't necessarily, this is like early stage 2, I want to say, or stage 3 in that area. But they would run a Sombra and a Roadhog and play very aggressively on Gibraltar A defense, and have the Roadhog pivot off of this mega health pack and force a lot of time burned. I believe in one of the more recent Contenders events, and I can't remember exactly which one it was, there was a team that held very aggressively on Dorado and had this quad tank composition, if I remember correctly, holding, I think it was European Open Division, where they would hold one of the houses early on the track for Dorado's defense and just try to take fights there and burn as much time as possible. It's really not amazing, because if you lose the fight, then you lose a lot of positioning towards the end of point A. But again, it's meant as a gimmick. It's meant as a cheesy strategy to kind of catch people off guard, rather than, you know, something that we actually think is the best strategy to run possible, right? Now, how does this impact the format? Because I think it's actually important to think about how teams are preparing. So in a tournament, generally speaking, you tend to practice or prepare a little bit more generally. Now, let's think about a tournament structure. Because for many Overwatch fans, I think we tend to immediately jump towards something like Apex. And Apex was something of a hybrid, where they had very small groups where you could prepare pretty well against other teams, because there was a pretty wide margin of, a gap. There's a gap between when teams play in that round robin. So you could prepare a little bit more specifically. But generally in a tournament, just a strict tournament, 48-man bracket, you're going to practice and prepare to the field rather than to the team or the player, right? So if I'm 1 of 48, to have more success and have a stronger bracket run, I'm going to practice to the field and more generally speaking, so fundamentals, just good strategies and good heroes, good characters, good compositions, rather than practicing specifically against your style. Same thing with a league structure in a round robin format, now again, this is a big caveat, depending on the structure of the league. So for the Overwatch League, I do think that you can prepare a little bit more to the team, but for the most part, you're preparing a little bit more generally to the field, so that you can, reach those stage playoffs and then hopefully reach the seasonal playoffs. But for the most part, you're practicing in general. You're practicing fundamentals. There's very few times that you're practicing to the team. Now, when you are practicing for the team, do come from those playoffs. You're practicing specifically, for instance, right? Think about the seasonal playoffs between, two teams. So it's a best of 5 of best of 3s. Lots of games being played. So I'm specifically practicing to beat whatever strategy that you're going to come up with. So that's when I can practice for cheese. I can start to cover all of your strange tendencies. Whereas in a league or a very broad tournament format, it's going to be difficult to practice for those strange or unorthodox compositions, those weird May boosts and Symmetra teleport strats. And peppering those into the Overwatch League is going to really create, or the first team to do it is going to kind of be a full team. And what do I mean by a full team? A full team is someone who can play standard compositions very well and play whatever is considered good very, very well, but can also develop their own niche, niche strategies and niche picks to really throw people off guard in the regular season, which forces people in the playoffs, if this team hypothetically made it to the playoffs, to cover those strategies as well. And I don't think we've, seen a full team. And I think when we do, I think it's going to be very apparent. I think you're going to really see a team that has the innovation of a season 2 Meta Athena and the execution of someone like the London Spitfire or the New York Excelsior, that can really be ironclad in their strategy and also develop some weird picks. So this is the definition of cheese in Overwatch for me. I think we are going to see a lot of it. Well, I guess a lot is a little bit too strong. I think we are going to see teams start to develop it, and look forward to that hopefully in Season 2. So if you like the video, and if you have any, maybe you want to debate about cheese or unorthodox strategies, let me know in the comments section down below, and follow my Twitter. And thanks for watching.